The morning the marina gate slammed shut echoed like a shotgun blast across the water, shattering the calm, slicing through the routine hum of boats rocking gently in their slip. Within minutes, angry footsteps stormed down the dock, led by the self-appointed queen of the HOA, her face twisted with outrage. She screamed that the entire marina belonged to the community. But she didn't know the truth. I owned the gate. I owned the dock. And I was done being bullied. What happened next would flip the entire HOA on its head and expose the secret they'd buried for years. If stories of justice, revenge, and long overdue karma speak to you, then join us here at HOA Justice Hub. Because every HOA that abuses its power eventually hits the wall, and when that wall is the truth, the crash is loud. Hit subscribe so you never miss it. The marina had always been my escape, a ribbon of quiet water stretching into the early morning mist, framed by the gentle clink of sailboat masts tapping against their lines. But over the last year, that peaceful refuge had transformed into a battleground. The HOA board, led by a woman who introduced herself everywhere as Marina Director, treated my private dock as if it were a public attraction. And for a long time, I tolerated it. I let their guests walk across my boards in their sandy shoes, let them tie kayaks to my cleats, let them treat my property as an extension of the community park. But every season, the crowd grew larger. Their parties grew louder. Their rules grew stricter, against me, not them. The imbalance simmered until the day I found a group of strangers grilling on my dock at sunrise. That morning was the spark that ignited everything. I had walked down to check the tide after a night of windstorms, only to find 5 unfamiliar men flipping burgers as if it were their backyard. When I asked who gave them permission, one shrugged and pointed vaguely toward the neighborhood. Another said, "That HOA lady said this whole place is common." Their confidence wasn't casual, it was practiced. They had been told that my dock belonged to them. And that lie had been spreading for months. That was the moment the decision crystallized. I went back to the house, grabbed the heavy marina gate key, and closed the entrance with a final metallic thud. Then I locked it with a 3-pound steel padlock. The sensation of snapping it shut felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. For the first time in a year, I could breathe. Within 10 minutes, my phone exploded with notifications. First, a group chat ping. "Did someone lock the marina?" Then another. "We have community events today. Who authorized this?" The messages escalated quickly, and I knew whose footsteps were coming before I heard them. Sharp, fast, and full of fury. She approached the gate like a storm. Her voice hit first. "Open this right now. This is common property." I stepped calmly onto the dock. "No," I said. "This is my property. And your guests are no longer welcome." Her eyes bulged. She rattled the gate like she expected it to magically obey her authority. When the lock didn't budge, she switched strategies, pacing with theatrical disbelief. "You can't do this. We have rights. I'll call the board. I'll call legal. This is a violation." I didn't raise my voice. "Read your own bylaws. The marina sections behind my house were never deeded to the HOA. I pay the taxes. I maintain the structure. That makes it mine." For a moment, she froze, processing the fact that I knew more than she expected. Then she spat out the line that would haunt the neighborhood chat for weeks. "This is common property because I said it is." That single sentence revealed everything: her entitlement, her ignorance, and the unraveling thread she was afraid everyone would finally see. She wasn't protecting the community. She was protecting the illusion of control. Word spread fast. Homeowners gathered along the walkway, whispering, pointing, filming. No one had ever challenged the HOA leader in such a public way. And certainly not someone she had tried to intimidate for months. The confrontation became a spectacle, a showdown between authority and ownership. And as the crowd grew, so did her desperation. She raised her voice, hoping volume would replace logic. "You can't evict community guests. They're here by my consent." "They're trespassing by law," I replied. Her expression faltered. She hated hearing legal terms she didn't understand. But instead of backing down, she did what all power-drunk HOA leaders do when threatened. She lied louder. "I'll have your gate removed. I'll have the city out here today. This is a public safety violation." Behind her bluff, I noticed something else: fear. It flickered in her eyes every time she glanced at the homeowners watching. She needed to win this moment. Her authority depended on it. The tension thickened as the crowd pressed closer. Some recorded with their phones. Others exchanged murmurs, wondering aloud whether the marina had ever belonged to the HOA to begin with. Seeds of doubt sprouted in real time, and she felt it slipping from her grasp. Then came the moment the conflict shifted from argument to declaration. I walked to the edge of the dock, looked her dead in the eyes, and said, "Your events, your parties, and your guests are no longer welcome on my property. Not today. Not again." The crowd murmured. The HOA leader looked like she might combust. But I didn't wait for her response. I turned, walked back toward my boat, and left her standing on the other side of the locked gate. I had made my stand, and whether she accepted it or not, the battle lines were drawn. But deep inside the storm building behind her eyes, I sensed something else: vengeance. And I knew she wasn't finished. She couldn't stand being challenged, especially not publicly. If she had been willing to twist rules before, she would twist them into knots now. And the consequences wouldn't just hit me, they'd hit the entire community. As the sun climbed higher, the boats rocked gently, unaware of the war that had begun. And somewhere in the shifting wind, I felt the first tremor of what was coming next, an escalation I never anticipated, fueled by her need for revenge. And by nightfall, she would prove just how far she was willing to go. The night arrived colder than usual, carrying a stillness that felt unnatural for early summer. The marina, normally a ribbon of soft reflections and gentle ripples, seemed to wait in silence, as if anticipating the next move in a game I didn't know I was playing. The HOA leader had retreated earlier, but her departure wasn't a surrender, it was a recalibration. People like her didn't back down, they regrouped. And as darkness settled across the water, the truth settled in with it: she was planning something. Back inside my house, I could still hear her voice echoing from the confrontation. "You can't win against the community," she had shouted before storming away. But I knew she wasn't talking about the community. She was talking about herself and the power she believed she wielded. For years, she had ruled through fear and volume, convincing homeowners that her interpretation of the rules was the only one that mattered. The locked marina gate had been the first challenge she'd ever faced, and she wasn't handling it well. As I stood near the window overlooking the dock, a small light flickered at the far end of the walkway. At first, I thought it was just a street lamp struggling against the night. But then another light appeared, and another, small beams weaving together like fireflies approaching a target. It took me a moment to understand what I was seeing. People were coming. A group of them, flashlights in hand. Their steps were quiet, but their intentions carried weight. My stomach tightened. I slipped on a jacket and stepped outside. The night air smelled like damp wood and salt. As I approached the path leading to the marina, hushed voices drifted through the dark. "We can't let him lock us out. She said the gate is illegal. They're going to cut it, right? That's the plan." Their whispers were sharp, nervous. Then came a firmer voice, hers. "We're taking back what belongs to the neighborhood. If he wants a fight, he'll get one." The sight of her at the front of the group didn't surprise me, but the number of people behind her did. 6, maybe 7. Some carried tools that glinted under flashlight beams. One held a metal cutter. Another carried what looked disturbingly like a pry bar. They weren't there to talk. They were there to dismantle my property. I stepped into the glow of their lights. "Stop right there," I said. The group froze. She turned toward me with a victorious smirk. "We're done with your tantrum. Move aside. This marina is common property." "It's not," I replied calmly. "You know it's not. And vandalizing my gate won't change the deed." Her patience snapped. You're obstructing community access. You're abusing your position as a shoreline owner. I shook my head. You created this problem. You told people lies, and now you're using them to remove something that isn't yours. She stepped closer, face twisted with self-righteous fury. If the community believes it's theirs, then it is. That's how this works. That's not how the law works, I said. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft lap of water against the rocky shore. Then she lifted her chin toward the others. Do it. One of the men raised the metal cutter. The steel jaws glinted as he hooked them around the chain. The tension in the air felt like it might snap before the lock did. I stepped forward quickly. If you cut that, every single one of you will be liable for destruction of private property. That made several of them hesitate. One shifted uncomfortably. Another lowered his flashlight. But she didn't budge. He's bluffing. The board will protect us. No board can protect you from trespassing charges, I said. Or from the city once they see the deed. One of the homeowners turned to her. You said the HOA owns it. Are you sure? She glared at him as if his doubt were a personal betrayal. Of course I'm sure. I know the bylaws better than anyone. I answered before he could. Then show them. Show everyone the deed transfer. Show the plat map. Show anything proving you own the marina. Her jaw tightened. The files are old. Hard to access. A murmur ran through the others. Doubt was spreading. She could feel it. Her voice sharpened. We're not leaving until that gate is open. You'll leave, I said, because you want to avoid a lawsuit. And because deep down you know she lied to you. That pushed her past the edge. How dare you accuse me? You accused yourself, I said. All I did was close my property. Something cracked inside her then, some fragile thread that had been holding her authority together. She grabbed the cutter from the man beside her. Fine, she snapped. If no one else will do it, I will. She lifted the tool, hands trembling. I saw the flash of desperation in her expression. This wasn't about access. It wasn't even about the marina. It was about humiliation. She couldn't stand that I had embarrassed her in front of the neighborhood. She needed to win, even if winning meant breaking the law. Before she could clamp down on the gate chain, I pulled out my phone. I'm recording this, I said. All of it. The tool froze midair. For the first time, she looked genuinely startled. You wouldn't, she whispered. Try me. The others took a collective step back. Even the bravest of them wanted no part of a recorded crime. One by one, the group retreated, their confidence dissolving under the weight of the camera. Only she remained, breathing hard, hands shaking with rage. This isn't over, she hissed. You think you've won? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, I replied. Someone who can't stand that the truth is finally catching up. Her glare burned like a torch in the darkness. Then she turned sharply and stormed away, her footsteps pounding down the walkway. But even as she disappeared into the night, I sensed something deeper beneath her anger, something colder, more calculated. And I knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't retreating. She was planning her next attack. The room felt smaller than it should have, the air thick with the weight of judgment and anticipation. The HOA meeting had always been a place where petty disputes, fence heights, lawn colors, mailbox paint, were inflated into grand debate. But tonight was different. Tonight, the entire community had gathered not to discuss a rule, but a person. And that person was me. As I stood up from my chair, the audience leaned forward collectively, as if waiting to watch a storm break open. The folder in my hand felt heavier than it ever had, containing the truth she had spent years hiding beneath her voice. I cleared my throat. I locked the gate because it's mine, I said. A ripple went through the room, some gasps, some scoffs, some shifting in chairs. Let's start with the facts. The marina behind my property has never been deeded to the HOA. I maintain it. I pay taxes on it. I'm responsible for its repairs. I held up the papers. and every one of these documents proves it. She interrupted quickly, voice sharp and poised. He's misinterpreting the paperwork. The community has always treated the marina as shared property. That precedent matters. She straightened her spine as if adjusting an invisible crown. We have rights. A man in the front row spoke up, brow furrowed. But is it actually in the bylaws? The deeds? His question cracked the unified wall she was trying to maintain. Another homeowner chimed in softly, if it's not in writing, we can't assume it's ours. She glared at them as though their doubt were a betrayal. The community has used it for years, she snapped. That's enough. It's not, I said. Usage is not ownership. You told people it was common property. You sent guests to my dock. Some even barbecued there because you told them they could. That's trespassing, and you knew it. Her nostrils flared. You're twisting things. No, I replied. You are. The board members exchanged glances. One leaned toward his microphone hesitantly. Do you have proof? The deed, the plat map? Yes, I said. Right here. I stepped forward and placed the documents on the table. The board members leaned in, scanning the lines as she watched them with visible panic. Her hand twitched as though she wanted to grab the papers and tear them apart. The silence stretched until one board member exhaled slowly. He's right, he said. The marina section behind his property is privately owned. A wave of murmurs rushed through the room. Some people looked stunned. Others looked betrayed. One woman whispered loudly, she told us it belonged to the HOA. She promised it. The HOA leader's face turned a deep shade of red. This is outrageous, she barked. That document is outdated. There must have been a change in the records. The developer probably intended the marina to be community property. Show us the change, someone called out. Show us the record. Another voice added, if it exists. Her composure cracked. She slammed her hand on the table. I don't need to prove anything. The community knows what's right. A man near the back stood up angrily. We've been using someone's property without permission? You let my nephews fish there. You told me it was fine. I was operating based on the spirit of the community, she insisted. Not on technicalities. It's not a technicality, I said. It's the law. She stared at me with a hatred so raw it almost vibrated. You're destroying this neighborhood. No, I said. I'm preventing you from destroying what's mine. Her jaw clenched. You think this ends tonight? You think waving papers around means anything? You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You locked the gate like a tyrant. You're acting above the rules. I'm acting within them, I said. The board president raised his hands. Everyone, calm down. We need to proceed professionally. Based on the deed, the HOA has no jurisdiction over the marina behind his home. That means we cannot force access, issue fines, or demand he unlock the gate. The room erupted, shouts of relief, anger, disbelief. Some homeowners looked furious, realizing they had been misled. Others simply looked embarrassed. But one person didn't hide her outrage. She stood up, trembling with fury. You're all fools, she hissed. He manipulated the document. He probably bribed someone to alter the records. This marina belongs to the neighborhood. And I will prove it. The board president shook his head. Unless you have evidence. Oh, I'll get evidence, she snapped. Just watch. She stormed toward the exit, but halfway to the door she paused and pointed at me, voice slicing through the noise. You just declared war, she said. And I don't lose. The room fell silent at her words. Even the people who had supported her moments before shifted uncomfortably. She turned and walked out, doors slamming behind her with a violent thud that echoed through the clubhouse. As the meeting dissolved into scattered conversations, I gathered my documents. Some homeowners approached me cautiously, apologizing for assuming the worst. Others avoided my eyes completely, embarrassed by their earlier comment. The board president sighed as he handed me back the folder. Be careful, he said quietly. She's dangerous when she feels cornered. I nodded. I know. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the distant clang of loose sail lines. I walked slowly toward home, the path illuminated by a cold moon that shimmered across the dark water. The marina, quiet and still, awaited me like a loyal sentinel. But beneath the calm surface lay a deeper current, one stirred by her rage. For the first time, I felt a flicker of unease. The locked gate had sparked anger. The meeting had ignited humiliation. Now she was promising retaliation. And someone like her didn't make empty threats. As I reached my property line, a faint sound drifted through the night. Something sharp, metallic, deliberate. It came from the marina. I froze. The gate was rattling. Not from the wind, but from hands. The rattling at the marina gate in the dead stillness of night sliced straight through the fragile calm I had been clinging to since the meeting. I paused at the edge of the dock path, listening as the metallic vibration came again, sharper this time, almost rhythmic. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't an animal, it was the sound of someone testing the boundary I had just defended in front of the entire neighborhood. My heartbeat thudded in my ears as I stepped closer, trying to peer through the shadows ahead. The dock lights flickered faintly behind me. As my eyes adjusted, a silhouette appeared at the gate, hunched and intent, tugging at the chain with the restless urgency of someone who believed the darkness protected them. I stepped forward, gravel crunching beneath me. The silhouette jerked upright. A harsh whisper cut through the cold air. "I know you're there." The voice was unmistakable, sharp, brittle, soaked in anger. It was her. She had returned after the meeting, not to talk, but to reclaim control she felt slipping from her grasp, control she believed she deserved. Seeing her there alone told me everything. She hadn't come to reason. She'd come to salvage authority shattered hours earlier. She clung to the gate like someone gripping the last piece of a collapsing identity. "You think paperwork makes you untouchable," she hissed, breath fogging in harsh bursts. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." Her voice trembled beneath the anger. I didn't respond at first. Darkness changes confrontations, turning them heavier, unpredictable, shaped by emotion rather than sense. When I finally stepped into the faint street lamp glow, her eyes narrowed with defiance sharp enough to cut through the cold. "Leave," I said. "You shouldn't be here." She shook her head violently. "You're the one who shouldn't have turned neighbors into enemies." Her fingers curled around the chain again. "I'll make them see what you're hiding." Her voice quivered with conviction, yet underneath it pulsed something more fragile, fear that her power, once absolute, was dissolving faster than she could hold it. The wind carried the slow creak of boats shifting in their slips, a sound that felt strangely mournful against the tension tightening the air. She lowered her voice. "If you don't unlock this gate, the board will take action. We'll rewrite whatever we have to." I stepped closer. "You can rewrite your fantasies. You can petition the moon. But you can't change a deed." For a moment, her certainty faltered, revealing panic she tried desperately to hide. Then she stepped aside, revealing an envelope bent from the force of her grip. She thrust it toward me. "This is your notice," she said. "The board voted. You're being fined for obstruction and hostile conduct." I didn't take it immediately. "You know those claims won't survive scrutiny," she sneered. "People trust me. That's what matters." Her voice carried the same arrogance she wielded at meetings, a belief that confidence alone created truth. I finally accepted the envelope, its weight symbolic of the escalation she intended to unleash. The fine itself meant nothing. The real danger was her determination to twist the narrative. "You're not protecting the community," I said. "You're protecting your image." She stiffened at the word. Pride had always been her foundation, and now that foundation was cracking. Her glare hardened, but a tremor ran through her posture, betraying the fear beneath the anger. A cloud crept across the moon, deepening the shadows around us. She stepped back, her silhouette trembling. "This isn't the end," she whispered. "You think this gate is a victory, but it's the first strike in a war you can't win." Her footsteps echoed sharply as she left the dock, each step a vow. Her absence didn't calm the night. It thickened the air with a warning that settled deep in my chest. When she was gone, I opened the envelope beneath the dim, emergency light. The notice inside was hastily drafted, full of exaggerated accusations. But a handwritten line at the bottom caught my eye: "You don't belong here." The handwriting wasn't hers. Someone else had added it. Someone supporting her from the shadows, or someone she had convinced to join her cause. The realization left a hollow coldness in my stomach. As I returned to the house, the crinkling envelope echoed like a quiet omen. This dispute was no longer about a gate. It was about power, illusion, and a woman who feared losing the authority she had molded into her identity. She wasn't finished. And the message inside the notice wasn't just a threat, it was a promise of what was coming. The real conflict hadn't begun yet, but it would soon. The marina seemed different as I reached my back steps, the water darker, the reflections distorted as if the surface itself sensed the unraveling ahead. I paused, listening to the faint clatter of rigging tapping softly against masts, a steady rhythm usually comforting but now carrying a subtle tension. The neighborhood lights flickered in the distance, each window hiding someone who might already be whispering her version of the story. I realized then that this wasn't only her battle. It was a narrative spreading through the community like slow poison. Morning arrived wrapped in an uneasy stillness, the kind that settles over a place just before something shifts permanently. The marina water lay flat as polished stone, reflecting a sky dulled by low clouds. I stood at the kitchen window, coffee cooling untouched in my hand, replaying the events of the night before. Her shadow at the gate, the envelope, the threat scrawled by someone unseen. The community had crossed from irritation into hostility, and she was steering it like a ship heading intentionally toward a storm. I knew today wouldn't pass quietly. I just didn't know how loudly the next escalation would arrive. It came in the form of footsteps. Not one pair, but many, measured, steady, purposeful. I stepped outside slowly. A small crowd had begun forming near the marina path, faces tense, whispering, glancing between their phones and the gate as though expecting it to crumble under the weight of their anticipation. At the front stood 3 members of the HOA board, clipboards in hand, expressions carefully neutral in that practiced way people adopt when they're trying to appear impartial while drowning in pressure. Then I saw her. She emerged behind them like a storm cloud, chin high, eyes glowing with triumphant defiance. She held several documents, waving them like banners proving victory she hadn't yet earned. "This is the day we resolve the issue," she announced, voice ringing through the open air. Her tone carried theatrical confidence, the kind of confidence meant less to communicate truth and more to rally followers. A few people nodded uncertainly. I approached slowly. "What issue would that be today?" I asked. She smiled tightly. "The board has reviewed your behavior. They've decided your obstruction violates community harmony standards. We're here to perform a mandatory inspection." Her grin stretched wider. "Of your peer." One of the board members shifted nervously. "We're here to assess whether the marina area is being maintained according to community expectations." I let the words settle. She had pressured them into this, convincing them that if they couldn't control the property, they could at least harass it. "You have no authority to inspect my dock," I said calmly. "It isn't HOA-managed land." Her voice sharpened like broken glass. "Everything in this neighborhood is subject to oversight if it affects the community." She turned to the others. "Proceed." The board members hesitated. One managed a halting, "We're unsure whether this is appropriate without confirming jurisdiction." "Jurisdiction?" she snapped. "We already know. This dock affects community access and safety. Start your assessment." "No," I said firmly. "You're trespassing." Her eyes blazed. "We're doing our job. Your job doesn't extend to my property." She stepped closer, lowering her voice with venom. "You can fight all you want, but this marina is the community's lifeline. You're strangling it. You're strangling the truth, I replied. Her glare hardened. Unlock the gate, or we'll document your refusal as non-compliance. The crowd stirred uneasily. People weren't sure whose side to take anymore. Some whispered, others avoided eye contact altogether, afraid of choosing wrong and facing her wrath later. But then something happened she didn't expect. A homeowner from the back, a quiet man who rarely attended meetings, stepped forward. Is there actually any rule that lets the HOA inspect private property? He asked. She froze. We are interpreting the bylaws. But the hesitation in her voice cracked the facade. Another voice joined in. Show us the bylaw. She shot them a furious look. Don't question me. But they did. And instead of shrinking beneath her anger, they turned their attention to me. May we see the deed again? Someone asked softly. Just to be sure. That shift, away from her and toward the truth, made something inside her snap. Her face twisted and she shouted, He forged it. Can't you see it? He's manipulating everyone. Her accusation hung in the air like a struck bell, vibrating with desperation. The board members stiffened, startled by the accusation they hadn't been prepared to support. You're lying, someone said from the crowd. The leader whipped toward them. No, I'm not. He made copies, changed the lines. He's a fraud. A manipulator. Her words were frantic, spiraling. Prove it, another homeowner said calmly. She stuttered. There's no time to show proof. But I know. I've always known. Her unraveling was visible now, thread by thread coming undone. People exchanged glances, concerned, startled, uneasy. The narrative she had built for so long was collapsing in real time. I stepped forward. You said the board would protect you. But even they're seeing the truth now. I gestured toward the 3 board members, who looked trapped between responsibility and the fear of confronting her. She turned on them. Say something, she demanded. Tell them he's lying. One board member sighed heavily. We reviewed the records last night. The deed appears legitimate. Her face went pale, then red, then something beyond either, a mixture of betrayal and rage that twisted her expression into something almost unrecognizable. You're choosing him? She whispered, voice trembling with fury. After everything I've done for this neighborhood? It's not about choosing, another board member said. It's about facts. Her breathing became sharp and ragged. You're all blind, she muttered. Blind and ungrateful. The wind shifted suddenly, sending ripples across the marina. A boat line clanged against a mast. She looked at the locked gate with wild frustration. Then she lunged, grabbing it with both hands and shaking it violently. This isn't yours, she screamed. It was never yours. It belongs to us. The crowd stepped back as the chain rattled under her fury. Her voice cracked, raw and frantic. I won't let you take this from me. I won't. Enough, I said. But she didn't stop. Not until her strength finally broke, and she collapsed against the gate, out of breath, trembling with rage and humiliation. Silence fell. Then she whispered, almost too softly to hear, You're going to regret this. She turned away, shaking, and walked off. No crowd following, no supporters left, no authority holding her upright. But as she disappeared down the path, I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm hadn't ended. It had only gone quiet. The most dangerous part. Night fell with an unsettling heaviness, a kind of stillness that feels intentional, as if the world itself is holding its breath. The marina lights cast long trembling reflections across the water, each ripple catching the glow before it vanished into darkness. After the confrontation that morning, the breakdown, the accusations, the public unraveling, most would assume the danger had passed. Most would think the storm had blown itself out. But I knew better. People like her didn't end with humiliation. They ended with retaliation. I walked the length of my backyard slowly, scanning the shadows near the dock. The evening breeze had a strange bite to it, sharper than usual, carrying a faint metallic scent that clung to the air. My gate stood firmly locked, the heavy chain unmoved since she rattled it with her fury. Yet something about the night felt off, as if the air itself had been disturbed by an uninvited presence. Inside the house, I checked each window facing the marina. The neighborhood seemed quiet. Her home, visible through the trees, sat dark except for a single window glowing faintly. She was awake, watching perhaps, thinking, planning. The collapse of her authority had carved deep cracks into her identity, and she was clinging to the one obsession that remained, reclaiming control at any cost. Hours passed, the tension settling into my bones. Around midnight, just as fatigue tugged at me, a sudden flicker outside drew my attention. Not the ordinary sweep of headlights passing down the street. This was sharper, closer, a thin beam cutting across the dock's entrance. A flashlight. Moving slowly, deliberately. I stepped outside into the cold night air, footsteps light. As I approached the path, shadows shifted near the gate. The sound of metal brushing metal reached my ears. Quiet, careful, practiced. I froze behind the hedge. Two figures stood at the gate. One tall, broad-shouldered, moving with nervous haste. The other smaller, posture rigid with determination. Her voice, though low, carried unmistakable sharpness. Just cut it, quick, before anyone sees. The man hesitated. If this is illegal. It's not illegal, she snapped. It's restoration. I'm restoring community access. It still feels like trespassing. This isn't trespassing, she hissed. This is taking back what's ours. The man raised the bolt cutters reluctantly. The steel jaws glinted in the moonlight. I stepped forward then, gravel crunching under my shoes. She spun around, flashlight blinding me for a second. You don't belong here, I said calmly. Her voice cracked with desperation. This is community property. No, I said. It isn't. And you know that. Her breath trembled, anger barely masking panic. You ruined everything. You embarrassed me. You turned the neighborhood against me. You did that to yourself. She gripped the gate with white-knuckled fury. I was protecting them. I was keeping order. You don't understand what it feels like to have people depend on you. That's not what this was, I said. It was never about the community. It was about control. She shook her head violently. No. You're twisting it. Then why sneak out here in the middle of the night? I asked softly. Why bring someone else to cut the lock if you're so sure you're right? The man stepped back, sensing the truth. Ma'am, maybe we should go. She ignored him. Her voice thinned to a breaking whisper. I can't lose everything. Not after all these years. You're not losing everything, I said. You're losing the thing you never had. Her flashlight beam trembled as her hands shook. They trusted me, she whispered. They listened to me. And they still would, I replied, if you hadn't turned this into a war. For a moment, her hardened expression faltered. Not in defeat, but in grief. Grief for the illusion she had spent years constructing and believing in. Then her face twisted into something darker. I'll file injunctions. I'll get the city involved. I'll make sure you're never allowed to. I already went to the city, I said. She froze. They reviewed the boundary lines. The marina behind my property is confirmed private. They're sending written verification. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The man beside her exhaled shakily. I'm not getting involved in this. He turned and hurried down the path, leaving her alone under the cold glow of the moon. She looked small suddenly, alone, trembling, stripped of her audience, her power, her certainty. But the anger remained. You think this stops me? She whispered. You think a piece of paper fixes this? It ends it, I said quietly. She stepped back slowly, the fight draining from her as reality settled into the spaces pride once filled. For a long moment, she stared at the gate as if it were a monument to her failure. Then she turned away, shoulders hunched, walking into the darkness without another word. The lock remained intact. The chain remained uncut. And for the first time in months, the marina felt still, safe mine. Over the next few days, the neighborhood changed. Without her voice dominating the conversation, people began to speak freely again. Some apologized. Some avoided me out of embarrassment. Some finally admitted they had felt bullied for years. Slowly, the power she once held dissolved into whispers of regret. The board voted quietly to remove her from leadership pending review, though everyone knew the review would never reinstate her. She moved away weeks later without saying goodbye. One morning, I found a single envelope at my gate. No name, no threat. Inside was a single sentence written in shaky handwriting: "I only wanted to be respected." I folded the note and stored it away, not out of sympathy, but because it was the final truth beneath all her noise. Respect isn't claimed through force. It's earned. And the marina, now peaceful again, stood as proof of that.